Roll.
Hey, listen, what I thought I would share is I sit in staff meetings like this every week, and I've helped pioneer a couple churches in Australia, and then of course I've been in university administration. So there's some of the things that I've experienced in rubbing shoulders with teams, and one of the things that I've discovered is that in the church there can be similar problems or challenges or opportunities like there are in the world. And I just thought I'd just share a few things. I've got a few moments with you, and if you'll just bear with me, if there are some Australianisms, try to overlook them. It should be something in general so that it can touch your heart. It's weather that has sort of gotten to my throat. So don't cough so much, okay? A couple things I wanted to start with is things on leadership. And I got a quote the other night that I thought was somewhat touching, and that is, being a leader takes courage, it takes discipline, and it takes determination. And a great leader can bring great success and great blessing. And one of the things that we review regularly as leaders in a church, I work in Rhema Family Church in Australia, in Brisbane, as a headquarters, is that we're commonly reviewing ourselves and reflecting ourselves as a team. And we find that as we reflect on ourselves as a team, we commonly are reflecting on ourselves, just having a look at ourselves as individuals within our own leadership style and our structure. One of the things that can happen in leadership, in ministry, is that there's a lot of work, and there's a tremendous amount of responsibility. Different than in business or in industry, the responsibility is one not only of the nature of the work that you do and the portfolio that you have, the teams that you manage, but that you have obligation to the Lord, and that we are under assignment, under heaven, for the things that God has called us to do within the structure of, in this setting, the local church. And so sometimes I have found myself, because I do work certainly more than 40 hours a week, and there's things that happen in regard into the intersection of myself with people, both in teams and within the congregation, that demand more from me than I would even when I was working in the universities. And that is that I have to represent Jesus. Wow. And I also need to represent my leaders, the vision and the mandate, or the mission that the church is under. And in that regard, for myself, I think I can be a tremendous example in saying this, not that I'm so amazing, is that I have strong leadership abilities. I am quite capable of coming up with programs, dreams and visions, and I have ideas that I can come up with all by myself. But the Lord didn't put me in an independent ministry. He put me in a team. And one of the things that I pledge to my leaders, and I have tremendous leaders that I work for, but they are mild-mannered Clark Kent types, and incredibly gracious and kind. And one of the things that I pledged to them when I took the position in the ministry is that I was there to serve them, I was there to follow them, that my ability to work in the team was going to be as good as them communicating to me what they wanted me to do. And I was going to do, to the best of my ability, do what they wanted me to do, and that in any situation that I was in, I have been the dean of the Bible schools. I've managed our Bible schools both in Australia and in Papua New Guinea. Is that in the daily running, I'll just use the Bible school as an example. In the daily running of the Bible school, which is in the lower floor of our building, that here was my pledge to my pastors and directors, is that there would never be a moment or time where they could walk into my office where there was a team, or walk into the Bible school in which they would ever be surprised by what was taking place. I always was in a position in which I would inform them, and that if there was something that we wanted to do in a certain sort of direction, that I had a sense of that was gear shifting, truly gear shifting, rather than just maintaining something in which I already had permission for, or I had a sense of how they wanted it, then I could just simply move forward very freely. But because I'm a strong enough leader that I can shift the gears with just a nuance of something here or there, I always was aware, as much as I possibly could be, that nuance could shift a gear, shift a direction, or it might be just a nuance that might shift vision or mission. I was going to ask, and my leaders and directors are open enough to say it's not how we want it. They're also smart enough to know that I can't do it like them. I am not a mild-mannered Clark Kent. I'm Aura. And so even in spite of that, I still have to fit within the formula of the way that they want church to be done, because they're in charge, and I never am. But two things I wanted to say to you from Scripture, or to remind you of, is that God is, He's well capable of supporting us. And when we come to kind of the end of ourselves, He's there to strengthen us. It says in Galatians 6:9, let us not be weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. And the harvest that I want to talk about is in a team setting within the local church. It's a team harvest. Is that we don't have individual wins. Departments can certainly move forward in tremendous ways. But anytime a department moves forward, let me use an example, like our Bible school moved rapidly forward with the structure of that. And it came out of many things that I had background and experience with, but it never belonged to me, and it never was going to be something that would shine out, that would be greater than anything that was greater than the whole. Everything that we do within the team is always part of the wider ministry, always there to support that which is the greater picture of that which is God, that God has called that church or that ministry to. The other thing that I found in Scripture that I want to share with you is that in Jeremiah 1:5, it says this: before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I set you apart. And I appointed you, in this particular instance, to Jeremiah, as a prophet to the nations. But that before the foundation of the earth, that there wasn't one of us that God didn't put under assignment, put skills in us, spiritual gifts, and that we were set apart for a work. But God does place people in teams. And one of the things that I share with my teams is that unless you're in charge, you're not. I just say that to you real simply. Unless you're in charge, you're not. And unless you're in charge, you're in some sort of capacity of the ministry of helps, even though your position may be significant. You're always there. And we're always there supporting, assisting, and aiding those that have been called to the senior leadership of the church, which in our case is our pastors, who are also directors. Whenever you're gifted of the Lord and you have a strong sense of the call of God on your life, one of the things that commonly takes place is, in my life, is that both that submission of that call to the Lord and the submission of that call to my leaders. And when we're in situations, I've been in several pioneering situations, and right now with the church that we're involved in, we're pioneering all the time. Things are not so established that you can't come up with other ideas, and we're always open to ideas that fit within the mission or fit within the vision of the church. And I work with people that are very open for the presentation of ideas. But one of the things that I always remind myself, and again, is that I'm under authority, I'm in submission, and I can come up with some pretty amazing ideas. In fact, I've been in teams that we've come up with some pretty wham-bang ideas that I think were absolutely brilliant. I've sat with my directors, and I work more closely with my lady director than I do with my male director at this particular time, and we have written together major programs. And then my leaders have gone to prayer. They're not willy-nilly, they've gone to prayer. And something within that prayer time, they have received something from the Lord. That would be when my lady boss, her name is Patsy, Pastor Patsy, and she'll sit down with me, and we have put hours, and we have charts and pages and lots of typing and thought and purpose and intention. And she'll say, Tony and I sat down, and we just think that we need to go this way. And it's happened on numbers of occasions where there have been hours of work put into things. But I have been always in a situation in which I go, on occasion I might go, my goodness. Well, all right then.
Mhm.
And then I shift gears. Because if I'm not in charge, I'm not in charge. And as much as I can hear the Lord in the circumstance and in the situation I'm in, I'm never crazy enough to think that he's going to give me the final plan. It always goes to my directors and my leaders and my pastors, and then I slide in to do everything I can to make that happen. And it takes a certain amount of grace when you're a strong leader. It takes a certain amount of humility when you're called of the Lord to be in constant submission. But it really isn't hard when you're connecting with the Lord and wanting to do what God has called you to do. In the Bible, the word of the Lord talks to us about building the church. And in Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, Jesus told Peter that he was going to build his church. And the building of the church is through people. But there is an order. There is a tremendous order within Scripture. And the building of the church, the local church, will always come where the primary vision and direction and mission of that church will always be imparted from heaven to the senior leaders. And everyone else under that will hear from them what the Lord is giving them. And together we will develop those things. And we're always in, as I say it, in support in making this happen in order to build that particular local church in the way that our leaders have heard from heaven. Now, it's not a secret to us things God say to them. It doesn't come on scrolls. They don't always have giant visions, angelic visitation, things like that. But God works through personalities and giftings. And the personalities and giftings of the people I work for in this situation are different than people I've worked for in other situations. I have been in other churches. I've helped pioneer other churches. I've worked in other situations. One of the things that I've discovered is that where something may be good in one situation, it isn't always the answer in another. And because I work in a team that have come from a variety of situations, we found that we could bring things to the table that were just like amazing here. And in some instances, there's pieces of that we're gonna extrapolate and we're going to use. But in some instances, it's really important that we don't hold on to things that worked in the past and go into a kind of some sort of forum of insistence that it's the way to do things. In fact, we're pretty careful in our own church that we don't insist that we've done in the past, what we've done in the past in our own church is how we have to do it tomorrow. In fact, in that fluid flow of meeting the needs of the congregation, meeting the needs of how the vision flows and changes and ebbs with the seasons and times, we're forever in a pose of evaluation to see how this is working and how this could work better. And we're always very careful that we don't lock ourselves into tradition when there may be a better strategy. But it takes some fluidity in order to be there, and some openness, because sometimes something, including our pastors, that put a really lot of time and effort into and had a certain measure of success, you will find that sometimes it's no longer the direction that the Lord wants you to go. And the shifting of those gears sometimes can be absolutely minute, but it can lead the church to grand success. Or there is something that wasn't quite as well developed, that if it's more developed within that setting, you're going to find the church will grow. It may not always be numerically, but it may be spiritually, or maybe the leaders develop more in a way in which they can better serve the people. There's a lot of reasons why tweaks and changes can make for a better church. Why would we want a better church? Well, because under heaven we have grand purpose and intention. You know, the church is to be a lighthouse, a place that beams out hope to a world in need for those that don't know Jesus. The church is also to be a storehouse and a feeding station, a place where the weary can come in that don't know him, the weary that can come in that do know him, and that we can be built up so that we can all walk in the call of God on our life and be encouraged. There's a lot of things that we can look at, like how do you do church? Well, how do you do church? Well, church varies with every local church and every denomination. They have the right to choose their structure, their vision, their mission under heaven, under the mandate that we are to build the church, be a lighthouse, to be a storehouse and a feeding station. And so there's a variety of ways churches put systems in place to make sure this happens, to make sure that happens, to tend after the people, and etc. Church and denominations also have culture. There's a certain culture. We have in our church written down the culture of the church. And recently in our job descriptions, I've been working on job descriptions, we've put in the church culture, our formulated, determined culture, and we've put it into the job description, so that when we come to yearly reviews or reviews that have to take place because of things that are going on, that we just look back and say, hey, does this match culture? And our culture is very much determined by the nature of Christ and things about how we'd handle people, handle situations, and handle one another. There's no doubt we have a mandate under heaven, and we also have a design that comes by what we've determined would be how our local church works and functions. But the keys to success in a local church many times rest within the leaders and the team and the staff. And so I thought I'd pick your brains for a few moments. See if there's anything in there. I don't know you very well, but there probably is. And I'd write up on the board what you would consider some of the key ingredients of a team, because it takes a team to build a church. Some of the key ingredients of a team to build a church, and we'd write them on the board, and then I'll ask you a few questions, and then we'll be out of time. So if you were on a team that was involved in building a church, that is a lighthouse and a feeding station, and working for leaders who are assigned by God, what would be some of the ideal ingredients of a successful team to bring the church to the place that God would want it to be?
Clear vision.
All right. Some other ingredients of the team. The makeup of the team. Attributes of the team.
Passionate people.
Passionate.
I think a need, because you're always going to have different personalities and stuff, so you need to have a good conflict resolution.
Okay, good conflict resolution. I'm involved in that in our church.
Trust and loyalty.
Trust and loyalty.
Unity.
Unity.
Come on, Gail and Ashley. Let's hear it.
Is that you? Yeah, come up with something.
And I know this sounds self-serving coming from me, but submission to authority.
Well, of course. What would be some of the attributes of the staffing? Characteristics?
Creative.
Creative. Fun. Fun, yeah. It's one of my favorites.
Administrative.
Yeah, organized, administrative.
Sorry guys, I'm taking off.
Team player.
Team player, yeah.
Kindness.
Kind. What about spiritual? Okay, I'll add spiritual.
We'll do somebody to bring that one in.
Anything else?
Determination?
Yeah. DTER. What about, I'm gonna add a few since I'm in the meeting, hard worker. Yeah, produce.
Which we already covered. Yeah. Willing spirit. Willing.
Yeah, willingness.
Chemistry.
I hated science.
Character.
Character. CHARACTER. Not a character.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I would say something else that's key is that there's a development. That the person is developing and growing.
Integrity.
Integrity.
Competent.
Yeah. We have a guy that works for us right now that is not competent. We don't have someone else to replace him. But I tell you what, that lack of competency makes a difference in the church. We might leave it there for now, and I'll just move on and say a couple things, and then we'll close up. Kind of watch the time for me. So you can see that there's a variety of things that are, key to a successful team. And of course, if we had more time, we could go through a variety of a variety of other kinds of things. And so I'm just going to go through a couple questions that I think if you have a little piece of paper, I think you could I thought as you kind of might rate yourself, give yourself a grade on these kinds of things as they are key. It's things that I have to check myself regularly, and I know that I work with others that I know need to check themselves. And one is, you could ask yourself the question, am I an ideal team member? Is this me? And if nobody's going to read your papers, but am I an ideal team member? And I'm going to tell you for myself, I have things to learn. There's a lot of things to learn. I find that when I'm in meetings, there's certain things I could contribute better. And there's a variety of ways that I could present things or do things that I feel I'm constantly in need of improvement in. Not that I'm a disaster. I wouldn't be where I was at if I was a disaster. But for the success of the vision and the mission of the church and the cohesion of the team, I have to be under development in order to fulfill my role or make my contribution better. Am I contributing to the vision or the mission of the church? Am I really contributing? Is there any place at any time that I'm building my own dream and my own vision? Am I on my own path? Or maybe I'm partway on the path, but there's a part where I make great contribution into my own goals and my own direction. What would I rate myself with attitude? What's your self-check on attitude? I've worked with team members in a variety of circumstances and situations, and as a leader, I can go very far with people with good attitude. When I run into people who are poor with their attitude, it is poison in a team. It's poison in an area of the ministry, because what will happen with attitude is commonly it will seep out in a look or just a side remark, or it might be in a meeting or a team situation that is not where everybody is there, and the essence is the decay and the destruction of the team or another person in the ministry or another team member or on the whole. It could be for someone that, the janitor never cleans the room. I mean, really. Or it can be, our pastors if they really. Or, the music people if they really. The secretary, if she's, here at 10 on the button, we'll all be happy. There's a variety of ways that attitude can destroy the sense of well-being. And the closed mouth confidentiality of leadership is absolutely critical to the well-being of the team and the local church. Things that are dysfunctional, and there can be things that are dysfunctional, must be taken care of behind closed doors in a courteous, respectful, responsible fashion. And if they cannot be dealt with within a particular period of time, then you just have to deal with them until they can. Sometimes not everything can be taken care of. You don't have the right person in place. You don't have enough money for this, etc., etc. But nevertheless, a church and a team is a moving mechanism, and it has to have some space for tolerance, so give and take, when things just cannot always be fixed. I work in a building that's being reconstructed all the time. There is stuff missing, and we have volunteers. There can be no toilet paper in the bathroom. Well, that is annoying. But we also have volunteers, and the guy that was in charge was in New Zealand in a wedding. So who am I going to get mad at? I mean, who am I going to get mad at? Their supervisor? Well, she just forgot, so I'm going to go help myself. There's a lot of ways you have to have tolerance, and you have to have a certain amount of give and take within teams in order to work with one another. It's like living in a family. If you got mad at everything that wasn't quite right, you're going to find yourself, just really sick of each other really quickly. Am I faithful? Am I faithful? Daniel, in Daniel 6:4, in the ESV version of the Bible, said, then the presidents and satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaints or any fault, because he was faithful, and there was no error or fault was found in him. Am I faithful? And if I am faithful, am I faithful as I could be? I'm actually a faithful person, but I always think I could still improve, because until I'm quite like Christ and doing it like he would, I'm probably not quite there. And anytime I'm not quite there, I'm a problem for my leader.
Yeah.
Because an ideal setting is that we're all going with them in the same direction, with the greatest attitude moving forward, as if we are all in a copacetic setting. And I want to be that person. Am I trustworthy? My leaders know that they can count on me. In a pinch, back to the wall, in a circumstance or situation where someone might be saying something against my leaders, they're not perfect, they're amazing people. I'm not going to join that conversation. I will turn it and I will say, I work with some of the most amazing people you could possibly imagine. If you think they're good in the pulpit, I'm telling you what, they're more amazing privately. But I will turn the conversation. Am I ethical? What are ethics? What are ethics? I find that in the ministry, ethics run in a variety of ways. How I run my program, how I conduct myself, what I do outside of the ministry. My trip to the United States, I ran it through my leaders. They owe me time, okay? But I ran it through my leaders, told them what I was doing. They know what I'm doing. Everything from visiting my sister to being here. They're very aware of it. Do I need their permission? Sometimes I do. Why? Why would I need their permission? Because in some circumstances and situations, I would be in a setting that might be in direct conflict to them, or in some situation that I wouldn't be aware of, and they may share something with me that I would then change my mind about my contribution in another setting. It might be in a situation where anytime we minister within a local area of our church, we don't Facebook it, we don't put it up in Facebook, because we don't want to draw people from our congregation to go and hear us. Why? Because we're not in charge. We're actually support staff. In every instance, we're supporting the leadership. A question you might ask is, are you a Lone Ranger? I've been a Lone Ranger. I know how to be one. But I'm telling you what, I'm in a team. And I'm out of my pose and my position when I'm a Lone Ranger, because God put me in a team. Am I sold out to the team, or am I using the situation to establish my own ministry? Well, why would he put me in a team if I was using the team to establish my own ministry? It's right in the middle, like working for Nike and, designing another kind of tennis shoe, when I'm right in the middle of a team, that I am to be connected with that team. It says here in Proverbs 20, verse 28, steadfast love and faithfulness preserve the king, and by steadfast love his throne is upheld. Do you want me to stop now? I can stop at any point in time, or I can go through a few more things.
Yeah, go ahead. throw a few more.
Okay. Am I pure-hearted? Am I pure-hearted? And I have an opinion about everything. I'm smart. I'm experienced. I'm not 16. Do I have an opinion about everything? Well, probably. Probably. What do I do with that? I have to submit my opinion to both the Lord, to the Word, and to the leadership, or the flow and the ebb of the ministry in which I'm in. And then my opinion goes that direction. But I have to guard myself. So I ask myself, and as leaders I'll say, have you dealt with areas of discontent? Have you dealt with in your own heart areas of just pure rebellion? What's rebellion look like? Well, man, it can be just an attitude of the heart. It can be an opinion. It doesn't mean you lead another whole team in another direction and you arrive someplace that the pastors aren't aware of. It may be just that little thing in your heart. It may be that thing in your heart that that festers and you foster it and it grows, and when you sit in meetings, you got other stuff going on in your head. Other stuff going on in your head. But when you're not pure-hearted and you're in some sort of either private or silent disagreement, you're out of your place under leadership and in submission. And how does it take to get back into submission? You just tweak your heart. You just come back into line. It says here in Proverbs 4:23, keep your hearts with all vigilance, for out of it flows the springs of life. And you can, with even silent disagreement, suck the life out of a church. Because what can happen is that where it's not vocalized, it can infiltrate the atmosphere. And sometimes leaders won't realize they're dealing with something that's unspoken, but they can't quite pull the team together. But there's an undercurrent, and it doesn't have to be loud. It can be even from a faithful person. And so again, it's just having a look at yourself, seeing where you're at, keeping your heart with all vigilance. Do I get along well with others? Am I easy to get along with? If I am, well, if I'm not, why not? Why aren't easy to get along with? And how can I fix that? Should I be easy to get along with? Well, look at the things on the board. We've got obligation under heaven to be a team and to be a team member. One of the things that I can say about, I'm not trying to brag on myself, I'm just telling stuff, is that we were under construction when the Bible school was in session. They're forever hammering and sawing and, and we were filming and we were recording and, oh, my goodness, and they'd have to move us here and they'd have to move us there. One of the things they could say was they could count on the Bible school. It was my whole staff. If they would listen to us what our reasonable needs were, and we would listen to them in a negotiation what their reasonable needs were, we would always make a decision for the betterment of the whole, but we would do whatever they would need if they just understand what we would need, and we would accommodate others. On occasion, children's ministry might go, are you kidding? We need da-da-da-da-da. And then youth might go, are you kidding? Do you understand? And they wouldn't move along with the greater picture, and they would always find themselves hard to work with. Are you easy to work with? Because if you're not, you can get in the way of the vision. Do you engender respect? If I worked with you, would I respect you by how you behave and function? Would I respect your call? Would I respect your style? Would I respect what you do in your program? Do you give respect? Do you give respect? Are you encouraging to one another? Titus 2:7 says this, show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching, showing integrity and dignity.
What was that verse?
Titus 2:7, ESV, I think. Can I be trusted with responsibility? Am I thorough? I work with a guy that falls down on the job with deadlines all the time, and he's in communications. I do not trust him. I cannot respect him. He's got a big mouth, and he's got attitude. He does fairly good work when it comes together. I don't know what to do with him on occasions. A variety of things you're going to do, but somewhere down the line you're going to fire him if he doesn't make a shift. But you know what? That's an example of some of the extreme. But as mature leaders, These are questions we need to ask ourselves. Can you count on me? Am I responsible? Am I thorough? Are my projects done on time? Am I an on-time person? Or I'm the kind that give excuses for unfinished work? It says here in 2 Timothy 2:4, and this is all ESV, no soldier gets entangled in civilian pursuits, since his aim is to please the one who enlisted him. You know, you can get caught up in a lot of stuff, but if you are under heaven working for Jesus, under assignment, in a situation under mandate from God to build the church, why would you want to get in the way of that? By irregularities and human excuses. Why would you want to get in the way? Do I do my hours? Or am I a time clock person like I work at McDonald's? Or do I really consider this a position that's ministry or service? Am I here to serve? Am I faithful in the office? Do I fake it? I had a guy that would fake it and sit and do all sorts of stuff on his computer. One day I told him, I'm going to sit your computer and your desk right outside my window of my office, and I'm going to see what you're going to do. All of a sudden more work was done. I mean, do you cheat? Who do you cheat? You cheat God.
Yeah.
I mean, do you steal hours from the Lord? Do you take pay you don't earn? What I would rather be is to not be paid and work more. I served for 2.5 years in our ministry, morning, noon, and night with not one penny, not zero, zip, 1 penny. And then my pay increased somewhat slowly. But I was serving him. And one of the things they said is you can count on Karen. I'm not bragging about myself, just talking about it. I'm going to do the job because I first worked for Jesus, and under him my leaders. Matthew 5:37, let what you say simply be yes or no. Any more than that comes from evil. If you sign contracts and you're in a position, then yes, you're going to do the job. Do I make decisions that have approval? Or am I doing my own thing? Do I recognize, respect, and respond appropriately to the persons in charge? I ask you this question, who's in charge? Who's in charge? Would you like me to stop there? I certainly can.
Yeah, I think it'd be a pretty good place.
Okay, I'll close with the verse then. Can I
Okay,
close
sure,
with the verse?
absolutely.
2 Timothy 2:15. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of faith, the word of truth, and the assignment that God has given you.
Awesome. Great things, great points. And I got this on video for anybody that wants to
Get a copy of it or something, make it available. A lot of information quickly. Thanks, Karen, for sharing it.
Do we have questions or anything for comments?